So now it says environmental issues, back to the class. Overview. In recent years, federal and state governments have adapted legislation to conserve and safeguard the environment from the dangers of expansion and development, particularly with regard to the quality of air, water, and soil. Environmental laws must be included into regional, county, municipal land use plans and regulations. Owners of private property responsible for adhering to these laws. So we have the environmental hazards. So let me see. Can someone share it? Let me see if I could do it, because if somebody can share it, I would appreciate it, but then I would have to look for it. Okay. Somebody shared it? No, not yet. All right. 19. So this was Bruno did. And then, did I get it? All right, let's see. I'm not sure if I did it. Hold on. Oh, okay. Thank you, Lacey. Yeah, I have to ask Bruno to teach me how to do that. All right. So we continue here. So we have environmental hazards, right? What can happen to a home? All right, we have asbestos right over here. We have electromagnetic radiation from the cable lines over here. We also have mold in the property. We have paint, lead-based paint, CFC refrigerants over here. We have carbon monoxide that could come from the stove, okay? It could also come from, where is the other one? The water heater and underground storage tanks, right? If they leak the soil onto, they leak the oil onto the soil. And then we have radon gases coming from the ground. And then we also have contaminated groundwater from nearby landfill, okay? So these are all environmental hazards. Pollution and hazardous substances in the environment are of concern to real estate because they affect the desirability, safety, and market value of the city's neighborhoods and backyards. No one wants to reside in a toxic environment. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, was established by Congress in 1970 to supervise many of the laws enacted to protect and restore the environment since that time. The Department of Housing and Urban Development Regulations, HUD, also apply. When discussing environmental hazards, state laws must be considered. A seller of 1 to 4 dwelling units is usually required to make a state mandated disclosure about the condition of the property, any known environmental issues. Okay. Previously, real estate professionals would accept seller supply disclosure forms without question, assuming that everything was correct and complete. Today, trust is a dangerous game. Okay. In fact, some states require real estate professionals to identify the problem and ask questions. So yes, in the state of New Jersey, you have to walk around the property, you know, and see what's wrong. Like I, as a contractor, I can quickly go in the property and see if there's problems. Why? Because I'm used to these issues. I'm used to these problems. But other real estate professionals, they have to become accustomed, ask if they don't know, to when they're showing a buyer a property. Okay. Did you want to say something, Fernando? No. Okay. Okay, no problem. Health hazards occurred within structures on real estate parcels in an area surrounding real estate. They may occur naturally as a result of human activity. Environmental laws regulate some, but not all, health hazards that affect real estate. Real estate agents, owners, and sellers have various responsibilities for detecting, disclosing, and remediating hazards. Some important issues are reviewed below. So we're going to look at asbestos. So now we're here remediating regulations of hazards. So we have to, what can be done? But we're going to look at these hazards first. A fire-resistant mineral, asbestos, known as asbestos, was only, was once widely used as insulation and to fortify other materials. Since the 1900s, asbestos has been incorporated into over 30,000 buildings, asbestos-containing materials. I have to open this up because my contacts are failing me a little bit now. It was widely used in residential construction from the early 1940s until 1978 when it was outlawed. While harmless in its original condition, asbestos is extremely friable and it can cause lung cancer if its dust filters into the air. So if it filters into the air, what it does, it settles in the lungs. It can't be taken out and you can get lung cancer. If it's found in the home during remodeling, it must be removed by professionals to prevent contamination. It could also be encapsulated or it could be covered. You know, like I've done basements where there's been asbestos on the floor, so we cover it with concrete and put tile over it and it's not disturbed. Okay, but we have to use special protection. It can be found in roofing, siding, other insulations, textures, paint, or artificial ashes, sulfur, gas fireplaces, some vinyl floor tiles, coatings for older hot water and steam pipes. So I'm doing a house now in Kearney and we're doing the basement. So we have to encapsulate some of the pipes because there is asbestos found there. State licensed technicians, especially sealed environments, are needed for the removal process because ineffective removal techniques could go further, contaminated the air inside the structure. The requirement further increases the removal costs that the waste produced to dispose of at licensed facility. In some situations, encapsulation or the sealing off of disintegrating asbestos may be preferable to remove. However, this depends on how frequently the condition of the encapsulated asbestos is checked to ensure that it is not disintegrating. To determine which building materials may contain asbestos, a structure should only be subject to asbestos inspection by a certified asbestos inspector. The inspector can also offer suggestions and the price of the corrective action. Buyers should be aware of the locations of ACMs to prevent any disruption during the maintenance, renovation, demolition, or regular use. Additionally, appraisers need to be aware of the potential for asbestos. Now we have lead-based paint and other hazards. Okay, so as a real estate agent, when you are helping your buyer, right, buy a home, there is going to be some type of disclosure if there's any lead-based paint in the property, if the property was built before 1978. We say 1979, but it's below 1978 and it's present, right? There is some type of contamination, air, drinking water, food, deteriorating paint and dust from the paint. Children are particularly susceptible because young children are known to eat chips of paint, allowing the lead to enter their bloodstream. So when children are small, when they're about, they test them for lead paint in their blood system, making sure that they haven't eaten it, because lead affects the brain of a child. Okay, they can have some type of retardation because of that. They cannot function and process properly. So they test the children very early on, especially in their bloodstreams. The damage caused by high levels of lead paint, which can result in development delays, learning disabilities, shorter structure, and impaired hearing, is most likely to affect children under 6. Adults who receive too much exposure may develop anemia, hypertension, gallbladder issues, and issues with the reproductive systems. The Lead-Based Paint Act of 1992 requires a seller's or seller's agent to disclose known lead problems in the properties built before 1978. And I will quickly show you, okay? I'll go to my GSMLS. This time I can sign in. All right, I got it packed. I got it down packed. Remember the other time I couldn't sign? All right. That's why I told Bruno yesterday, it happens to the best of us, because he couldn't sign in either. All right. All right, so I want to show you something really quick, because you're going to be working with this as a real estate agent. Okay. Let's do Newark. And we'll do search. Okay, let me take any property. Let me see if this is a house. Okay, so right here, we see this property, okay? And now we're working with a client and they want to know something about the house. The first thing that you should advise them when putting an offer is to look at the property disclosure, okay? And this house doesn't have the property disclosure, which is weird because they're supposed to have it, but they do have the lead paint disclosure. And they're letting you know, your client has to see this, that there's no problems to the property, but he can still have an inspector come and do an inspection of lead paint. Okay, I don't know why it's not opening. Oh, it's down here. Okay, so it looks like this. The disclosure of information and acknowledgement of lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards. It has to let them know if there's anything that there's any lead-based paint here. If not, they put no. Seller has no reports or records pertaining lead-based paint hazards in the housing. Second, seller has no knowledge of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the housing. So everything is good, everything is signed, and it's uploaded to the MLS. Now, let me just go back to see if we see a property disclosure. It doesn't have a property disclosure, which is weird, but most homes should have one if they're on the MLS. So let me just go here. This one doesn't have it either. All right. They might have it where they can forward it. I don't know. Let's see. This property here. It's on the contract already. So, okay. Yes, I don't see it either. Let's see what else. I'm looking at more of the expensive homes to see if they have it. Nope. Okay, here we go. So now they have the lead paint disclosure, the one that I showed you before, and the seller's disclosure. Usually the MLSs ask you to provide that information. I don't know why those homes don't have it. So of course, it's the way it scans. So here. So now it says it gives you all the details of the property. What is wrong with the property? Okay. So if it says yes, it gives you the information. And if it says no, it leaves it out. All right. So they occupied the home in 2020. Do you have any possession of original copy of deed evidencing the ownership of the property? Yes. The roof, the age of the roof, unknown. So there's nothing wrong with the roof. Attic basements, nothing wrong. And so on and so on and so on. So this is something that you need to show your client to make sure they can make a decision in, in buying that house. Maybe if you put the age of the roof is 9 years, then the buyer knows that after the 10th year, the roof is going to go, or it's going to be some water damage or something. So they have to take that into consideration when asking for some type of repair or concession. Okay, so let me continue. I showed you guys that. So the Lead-Based Paint Act requires the sellers and seller's agent to disclose any known lead problems. Okay, and it says that the licensee must give the buyer or licensee a copy of the PA HUD U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission booklet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. Further, 1996 lead-based paint regulations require sellers or lessors of almost all residential properties built before 1978 to disclose known lead-based paint hazards and provide relevant records available. The seller is not required to test for lead, but must allow a 10-day period for lead inspection. Okay, if they want to waiver, they can waiver the inspection, or it has a 10-day period to do it. Only a licensed lead professional is permitted to deal with testing, removal, or encapsulation. It is a real estate practitioner's responsibility to ensure compliance. Buyers are permitted to up to 10 days to conduct a risk assessment or inspection of lead-based paint hazards. The buyer and seller can agree in writing to extend or shorten the inspection period, or the buyer may waive the inspection. The regulations specifically require real estate agents to ensure that all parties comply with the law. Vendors, lessors, renovators must disclose any prior tests resulting or knowledge of lead-based paint hazards. All real estate professionals, sub-agents, buyer's agents, transaction facilitator must, with limited exception, advise sellers to make the required disclosures. Only buyers' representatives who the buyer exclusively compensate are exempt. A home can be inspected for lead hazard in the following ways. So where can you see a question on the state exam? Right here. Okay. You have to give that consumer pamphlet to your buyer. Okay. Over here. That could be a question on the state exam. And what type of, how hazard it is: skin, dangerous, ingested, or inhaled. Okay. So the regulations specifically require real estate agents to ensure that all the parties comply with the law. Vendors, lessors, and renovators must disclose any prior test results or knowledge of lead-based paint hazards. All real estate professionals, okay, I read this, I'm sorry. A home can be inspected for lead hazards in the following ways. Paint inspection. A paint inspection will provide the lead contents of every type of painted surface in a home. The inspection does not indicate whether the paint is a hazard or how the home buyer should deal with it. Risk assessment. A risk assessment identifies any potential source of lead exposure, such as flaking paint or lead dust. It also describes the countermeasures that can be taken against the hazards. Radon. Now we're going to learn about radon. Also, there are inspections for radon. This is the easiest hazard to detect and mitigate. It is an odorless, colorless, tasteless, and radioactive gas that is created in the ground where uranium and radium exist. Prolonged exposure to radon can cause lung cancer. It can enter the home through any cracks, gaps, or cavities, including crawl spaces and opening ground pipes. It can be easily detected by radon test. So home inspection should include the test. As a known Class A human carcinogen, radon has been categorized. Additionally, smokers have 15 times higher radon risk factors than non-smokers. The EPA recommends remediation levels measure of 4 picocuries PCI or more. Right here. Might be a question on the state exam. Right here. Okay. Real estate agents should talk to buyers about radon issues before showing them properties, because 1 in every 15 homes likely needs mitigation. Realtors can suggest that buyers go to the website for the consumer guide to radon and more details on testing and mitigation techniques. So if you have New Jersey like this, right? If you cut New Jersey in half or in four quarters, what is that doing? Okay, this part over here has the highest grade of radon. Near the beach, it has the lowest. Where we are, it's pretty low. South Jersey by the beach is low. Here it has medium. Okay, when I used to live in Sussex County, I remember I was doing a basement there and they were taking out the radon. It's very easy to get rid of radon. You supposedly put a fan in the window in the basement, and usually is able to get that radon out through the window. Formaldehyde. Because of its preventive properties, formaldehyde, a colorless chemical with a strong noticeable odor, is widely used in manufacture of building materials and many household products. Formaldehyde is frequently emitted as a gas in one of the most common and problematic volatile organic compounds, and is one of the few indoor air pollutants that can be measured. The Clean Air Act Amendment of 1990 designated formaldehyde as a hazardous air pollutant. Okay, so you will be tested on radon, asbestos, and formaldehyde. Okay, it has been designated as a problem human carcinogen, causing cancer in animals and problems in humans. It can cause respiratory problems such as shortness of breath, wheezing, chest tightness, and asthma, as well as eye and skin irritation, burning sensations in the eyes and throat. It contributes significantly to sick building syndrome in commercial properties. It is used in uroformaldehyde form insulation, was banned in 1982 and later reduced to a warning, but the material is still present in many structures. This type of hazard is found in foam thermal insulation in homes built in 1980. The formaldehyde gas emissions from the insulation decrease over time, so most homes with the insulation no longer pose a threat. The most common sources of formaldehyde in a home are pressed wood products such as particle board, hardware plyboard paneling, and medium density fiberboard. Plastic furniture, new carpeting, and other vinyl materials also emit formaldehyde gases during the first few months after installation. Professional testing can identify levels and, in some cases, sources of formaldehyde gas and other VOCs. Okay. Carbon monoxide, another question on the state exam. This is an odorless, color toxic gas that can kill a person before its presence is known. It can be caused by unvented kerosene and gas space heaters, leaky chimneys, backdrafting from furnaces, gas water heaters, wood stove, and fireplaces. Gas stoves, gas lines, powered equipment, vehicles exhausting, garages, tobacco smoke. Carbon monoxide can be detected in structure by a unit similar to a smoke alarm, which should be included in every home, especially those with gas equipment and fireplaces or furnaces. Okay. This one is hard for me to. It's hard for me. It's okay. Polychlorinated bifenazole. Okay. Are a group of over 200 chemical compounds that do not occur naturally in nature. They were often used in electrical equipment such as transformers, electrical motors, and refrigerators. Now I know why we get transformers. You know, they just caulking compounds and hydraulic oil and other equipment because they were flame resistant. PCBs have been classified as reasonable carcinogenic by the EPA, and these chemicals have been linked to lower fertility and shorter lifespans. Although commercial distribution of PCBs was prohibited in 1979, PCBs remained in the environment because only known way to destroy them is to burn them at over 240,000 degrees in a closed environment. Okay. Chlorofluorocarbons. Okay. These words are non-toxic, non-flammable chemicals that are used as refrigerants in air conditioners, refrigerators, and freezers. Are also found in aerosol sprays, paints, solvents, and foaming agents. Along CFCs are safe in most applications are inert in the lower atmosphere. Once CFCs vapors reach the upper atmosphere where they can survive for 2 to 150 years, ultraviolet light breaks them into chemicals that deplete the ozone layer. While newer air conditioners use a different product, older appliances may leak CFCs and should be disposed of properly to prevent further leakage. A buyer's agent may advise the client to upgrade to newer, more efficient effective and environmentally safe appliances. We have a gym downstairs. That's where you get all that jumping. Yeah. Only EPA certified technicians should work on refrigeration systems, particularly those found in commercial and industrial buildings. Our favorite, mold, right? We love mold. This is a fungus that grows under moist condition and causes allergic reaction for some people. The presence of mold in the home must be disclosed as a latent defect. Because they're going to ask you what are latent defects, what are material defects, so you should know. Flooding and water damage must also be disclosed, as both of those can lead to mold growth. Inspections do not always find mold because it often grows inside walls and ductwork. Most molds require removal by a professional. Mold is a major concern for real estate professionals, especially since homeowners' insurance policies now generally exclude mold coverage. In addition to construction and insurance companies, plaintiffs may name as defendants property sellers, landlords, and property management companies and real estate professionals. Because of Eddy versus BSTV Inc., 2005 Wisconsin case and other court decisions on the subject, real estate companies and professionals are unsure what to do when mold is suspected or found on property. At the moment, there are no federal requirements to disclose mold contamination, and only a few states require it. Buyers should be reminded by real estate professionals that sellers cannot disclose what they do not know. Furthermore, real estate professionals should inform buyers that they have both the right and obligation to investigate the presence of mold. Okay. So that's a big thing. Like if you see black, it's already dried up. Usually the mold is when it's still white or yellowy on the wall. That's where the concern should come. We had a whole a person come and talk to us about inspections, mold, formaldehyde, radon, what we've talked about here, because we need to give that information to our agent. Bruno was talking about this in NARS. If you become part of the National Association of Realtors and you become a realtor, there's a lot of education that we can't give you in 75 hours. We just can't, right? It's already jam-packed with a lot of information. So you can become a realtor if your sponsor is part of the National Association of Realtors. You can become a realtor associate, but if you're not, then you have to pay it on your own. Well, you still have to pay it both ways. I don't know if I think it's more expensive if your sponsor is not, subscribed to that organization. I'm not too sure, but you can get all that additional education. There's still a fee associated with it, okay? But instead of paying $50, I think they put it down to $35 or $25 for the class, which is really good because I've taken a whole bunch of courses. I feel as a realtor, you get all this information so that you can pass it on to your clients. Any contamination of underground water threatens the supply of pure, clean water for private wells or public water systems when the Earth's natural filtering systems are insufficient to ensure the availability of pure water. To preserve and protect the water supply, numerous state and federal laws have been enacted. Groundwater contamination can occur from a variety of sources. I just need a little bit of water, just a second. The tongue is slipping on my lips. Okay. Including waste disposal, site runoff, leaking underwater storage tanks, septic system, dry wells, and storm drains, as well as illegal disposal of hazardous materials and the regular use of insecticides and herbicides. Contamination can spread from its source because water flows from one location to another. Once the source of the contamination has been identified, it can be removed. Although the water may eventually be clean, the process can be time-consuming and costly. Okay. Safe Water Drinking Act. Hold on, where am I? 272. Let me see how many more pages. Oh my God, I had like 19 and 20 together. I was like, wait a second. How many pages? 272. All right, so we have, okay, we're good. We're good. We're good. We're good. Oh no, that's not the page. Hold on. Oh, okay. Gonna have to speed it up a little bit. All right. So any questions so far? A lot of information here. Let me know if you have a question. Wait, hold on. Let me get the chat. I'm sorry. I think it went away on me. All right. So thank you, Alexander. I still can't say it. I'm gonna have to practice at home like the kids. Chlorofluorocarbons. Thank you. Is that the way you say it? Alexander? Yes? Okay. All right, let me continue. The Safe Drinking Water Act. Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water in 1974 to regulate and protect the public supply of drinking water. The act authorizes settings of standards, protection of water sources, training of operators, funding of improvements, and dissemination of information. On the act, water suppliers must report health risks to the EPA within 24 hours of discovery. Hydraulic fracturing, remember, I think I saw it on the news. Fracturing, oil and gas production poses one of the greatest current threats to underwater. Oh, Alexander, I don't think anybody likes the water of Newark. If you don't buy bottled water, you're in for it. We had that whole thing last year. I mean, I don't live in Newark, but they had the whole thing the way we're giving water to the people. Property sellers generally must disclose the source of drinking water for the property and the presence, type, and location of the septic system on the property. A water supply other than a municipal one and any septic systems other than a standard one should be tested. So when I lived in Bloomfield, they usually have a report that would send us every year, okay? And so even with being in Bloomfield, our water wasn't the greatest. It wasn't as bad as Newark, but the surrounding cities still get contaminated anyway, so it wasn't the greatest. So we had to buy a filter and for the faucet and a water system. The wetlands, now the protection of the wetlands. Wetlands are typically south of Jersey. The Wetlands Act of 1970 was enacted to regulate development in titled wetlands in the state. Legislation for the act required identification and mapping of where tidal wetlands existed. The act also required that on-site permanent obstructed public access to tidal waterways and its shores be provided at all times, including at military installations, industrial facilities, commercial ports and harbors, airport, roads, and energy facilities. The act regulates the placement of structures, excavations, pesticide application, or other similar activities. The Clean Water Act was passed in response to the need to restore and maintain the quality of the nation's waters and regulates the transfer of oil, sand, and other fill materials into waters and wetlands. Underground storage tanks. So you might see quite a test question on wetlands, just to let you know, okay? Underground storage tanks. USTs have at least 10% of their volume underground and are used to store fuel, oil, gas line, and other toxic fuels. Tanks made of steel can corrode over time and leak in their contents into the surrounding soil, contaminating groundwater. They also provide a potential for fire explosion. Tank removal is expensive, so removal is not common. Therefore, potential buyers must be informed of the presence of UST on the property and of the health and financial risk of purchasing a property that contains UST. Legal requirements. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act is a federal law that authorizes the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, to develop a program for the proper management of underground storage tanks, as well as hazards and on-hazard soiled waste. A landowner whose property contains underground storage tanks is subject to stringent requirements under federal and state law. The regulations apply to the tanks that store at least 10% of volume underground. So you might see a question on the state exam on this, okay? So it says, and contain hazardous substance or liquid petroleum products. Some states have passed laws governing underground storage tanks that are stricter than federal regulations. All UST's owners must register their tanks and follow their strict technical and administrative guidelines that regulate installation, maintenance, corrosion prevention, overspill prevention, monitoring, and record keeping. Owners must also demonstrate that they have sufficient financial resources to cover and damage used by a leak. Among those exempt from federal regulations are the following types of tanks. Tanks with a certain capacity of fewer than 110 gallons. Farm and residential tanks containing less than 1,100 gallons of non-commercial motor fuel are exempt. Tanks containing heating oil that was burned on the property. Tanks on or above the floor of particular underground areas such as cellars or tunnels. Septic tanks and collection systems for storm water and sewage. The majority of the seller property disclosures are only required for residential properties. The majority of the problematic PTS are found in commercial and industrial properties, putting the buyer squarely on the hook for discovery. Because many older tanks were never registered and exempt tanks are not required to be registered, real estate professionals and their buyers should be especially vigilant for presence of fill pipes, vent lines, stained oil, and fumes or odors, all of which can indicate the presence of a UST. Detection, removal, and cleanup of surrounding contaminated soil can be costly, so it's critical to address these issues prior to rather than after closing. So this is, okay, I'm gonna pause here. This is very true. So when you're working with your clients, most of the time they don't want to do an inspection, but you have to like nudge them and say, listen, this is important. You need to do an inspection. And on top of that, to check for radon, to do a tank sweep, and to check the line, the sewage line that goes all the way to the main line. Okay, these are 3 things that I would suggest. And if you think for the lead paint, to do an inspection. So the radon, I'm sorry, say that again. I'm gonna repeat it. So the first one is just regular inspections, right? They're gonna look at the property, see what's wrong, if there's something wrong with the roof or the ridges on the roof or the inside of the home, if there's problems with the bathroom, lighting, electrical, plumbing, sump pumps, okay? If there's any structural, mechanical problems with the house, heater, water heater, all that stuff. Now, that inspection is 1, radon, okay? And a tank sweep and the cleaning of the sewer pipe. I forgot that service in this moment, but can't recall it right now. It's what happens is they look at the pipe, they put a camera through the pipe that goes all the way to the sewage line, okay, the main line, to see if there's any backup. Because if there's a storm, that water is going to come back to the house and everything that was inside the pipe will come inside the house, okay, that backup. So now, radon is a test that they do. Okay, so somebody put here, Connie, if you sell a house, it is true that the tanks have to be removed? That's a question, okay. My parents' house has 1 above ground, and then the town made everyone do 1 underground in front yard years ago. They never used the one in the back of the house, was not using oil heating when they bought it back in the day. So yes, it depends on the town. Most likely you want to remove it because you want to see if there's any type of contaminants inside the soil, right? It's usually the seller who has to remove the oil tank. Now, the radon test that I was telling you guys is usually the inspector is going to come into the house and put like a test in there to measure the radon. Then after a few days, they come back and they take the test and they take it with them and they'll give you the results. Now, my issue with one of the properties that I had was that there was no basement. And the owners lived in the property, so they were constantly opening and closing the door, so you couldn't really get an effective radon reading. And what happens is that we had to waive that inspection. Now, the other property, we had a vacant property, so the radon test was put in the basement, and after 4 days, the inspector came to take out the test and to take a look at it and tell us that everything was good. Now, we also had a tank sweep. That means that if there is a tank inside the ground, usually it was disclosed that the tank had been taken out by the seller to see if there was any contaminants or people bury stuff inside the ground. Yeah, because they don't want to get rid of it. There's properties that they've seen like a boat, a fridge, a washer, a pool. All these things can be buried inside the ground. So then the new homeowner has to deal with that. So they do the tank sweep to make sure there's nothing on the ground. Then after that, there's also what I did tell you about the lead. You have 10 days to do that. And usually inspector comes in and looks at all the paint and the chips of paint and does the test. Okay. And the water sewage line cleanup too, to see if there's something wrong with the line that goes to the main drain. Okay. So it says waste disposal sites and brownfields. The oh my gosh, the RCRA, as well as the state and local regulations, governs the location, construction, content, and maintenance of landfill sites built to accommodate the vast quantities of garbage produced daily in America. Commercial or industrial sites that are no longer in use, but many contain toxic waste, are also regulated. Waste disposal sites. Okay. Oh my God, I thought it was 9/28. It's today is September 28th. I was like, did we go this far? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Any huge hole in the ground, either excavate to dispose of waste, or as a leftover from surface mining operations, is the beginning of a landfill. The specific hole is lined with clay or synthetic liner to stop waste from leaking into the water supply. Monitoring of the leaks and leaching is possible thanks to an underground drainage system. A layer of topsoil is compacted onto the water after it has been laid out on the excavation's liner. The layers are piled up occasionally as high as several hundred feet, and the layering process is repeated until the landfills are full. In hazardous waste disposal sites, radioactive waste from nuclear power plants, toxic chemicals, and waste products from industrial, scientific, and medical process are also disposed of. These sites are on rural properties, including farms, ranches, and homes. Typically, these disposal sites are only found in remote regions far from cities and agricultural land. State and federal regulations prohibit toxic substances from escaping hazardous and radioactive waste disposal sites. Brownfields. Brownfields are abandoned commercial and industrial sites that are likely to contain toxic material. The Small Business Liability Relief and Brownfield Revitalization Act, known as the Brownfields Law, passed in 2002, provides cleanup funds, liability protection, and tax incentive to reclaim contaminated properties. Under this law, owners who neither cause nor contribute to the contamination are released from liability for the cleanup. Some of these brownfields, they're being cleaned up to make more housing. In Bloomfield, I think it's Bloomfield Belleville border where the hospital is. I don't know if you guys know that area. Clara Moss, there used to be a brown structure there, a brownfield. And it was more for pharmaceutical, but the ground was contaminated. So they cleaned it up, and now you see like they have the Starbucks, they have the Wawa station there and stuff like that. So that's how they clean it up, and then they put something else there. Because there's not, look, land can't be really movable, right? A property of land, even though it's geographically, when we do land descriptions, it was there. You can't really, even if you excavate, you can't destroy it. You can excavate, but how much can you excavate of the land, right? Maybe a little bit until you see that there's so much of it. So you really can't destroy it. You can't move it, right? So land becomes scarce. With time becomes scarce. The population keeps growing and we need this area. So now if you take Ironbound, for instance, right? Ironbound, you used to be industrial. There used to be all these factories. Where I go to church, now there was this school there, and Catholic Charities were there, and then there was this other old factory building. They're taking all that down, and they're doing new housing in that side of Ironbound because there's a need for it because the density of the population that is still growing in that area. Environmental liability. While the EPA enforces laws aimed to protect and improving the environment, most federal laws encourage state and local governments to pass their own legislation. Fernando, are you Sylvia's friend? Oh, okay. Sorry, because there's an associate here called Sylvia, And she told me that she had invited a friend to the classes, so I thought it was you for a moment there. CERCLA. In 1980, Congress passed a Comprehensive Environment Response Compensation and Liability Act. It establishes the Superfund, a 1.6 billion fund to clean up uncontrolled hazardous waste sites in response to spills. The act established a procedure for identifying potential responsible parties and directing them to assume responsibility for the cleanup. The EPA oversees, administers, and enforces CERCLA. This right here, you can see a question on the state exam. Liability. A hazardous substance is released or threatened to be released on the landowner's property. The landowner is liable under CERCLA, even if it wasn't there, even if they were the cause of the contamination. Where the contamination is a result of the landowner's action or the actions of others, the owner may be held liable for the cleanup. You can ask CERCLA to help you. They'll cover a portion of it. This liability includes not only the cleanup of the landowner's property, but also contamination neighboring property. If the landowner is not responsible for the contamination, he or she can seek reimbursement for cleanup costs from previous landowners and other responsible parties or the Superfund. You can go online and look at the Superfund. There's a lot of information there, okay? However, if other parties aren't available, and even a landowner who did not cause a problem may be held solely responsible for the cleanup costs. An amendment to the Superfund law modified the strict liability somewhat. So, it depends. It has been, they had such a strict liability, so now they modified it. When the EPA determines that a hazardous material has been released into the environment, it is authorized to take corrective action. It seeks to identify those who may be held accountable. If the PRPs agree to help with the cleanup, they must also agree on how to split the cost. If the PRPs do not volunteer to do the cleanup, the EPA may hire its own contractors to do it. The cost is then billed to the PRPs by the EPA. If the PRPs refuse to pay, the EPA can sue for up to 3 times the actual cost of the cleanup in court. Under the Superfund, liability is strict, joint and several, and retroactive. Strict liability means that the owner is solely responsible to the injured party. Each individual owner is liable for the total damages under joint and several liability. If only one of the owners is financially capable of bearing the total damages, that owner must pay the total and collect proportionated shares from the other owners as soon as possible. Radioactive liability means that the liability extends beyond the current owner to provide owners who were present at the time the site was contaminated. Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act. The Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act establishes the status of innocent landowner. It acknowledged that in some cases, a landowner in the chain of ownership was completely innocent of all wrongdoing, thus should not be held liable. The Innocent Landowner Immunity Clause established the criteria for determining whether a person or a business could be held harmless. The following were among the criteria. A third party was responsible for the pollution. The party was purchased after the fact. Property was purchased after the fact. The landowner had no direct or indirect knowledge of the damage. When the property was purchased, due care was taken to ensure that there are no damage to the property. The landowner conducted a reasonable search known as the environmental or phase 1 site assessment. I got tested on this when I was an instructor. It drove me crazy because it asked you what are the tests. In exercising ownership rights, reasonable precautions were taken. So this is more commercial, okay? Most of us will do residential. In the state exam, they're not gonna go that deep, okay? The school exam could be different than the state exam. I'm just letting you know this, okay? The presence of undisclosed landfills and hazardous waste sites has the most serious effect on property value associated with environmental problems. Real estate professionals can advise buyers to check the EPA website Superfund to see if a property or interest is near a Superfund site. So like I said before, if you're gonna become a real estate agent or later on become a realtor, I'm telling you right now, you have to be the greatest investigator, because when you're investigating each property, you're seeing what's wrong with the properties. Now, if you're dealing with something like this, then definitely you have to go to the Superfund website and learn more about these environmental issues. Okay, dealing with environmental issues along Many of the liabilities involved in the environmental issues have been identified by federal and state laws. Common law, case law based on judicial precedents is frequently used for further interpretation. All parties involved in real estate transaction, including the real estate professional, must be aware of both actual and potential liability. Sellers are frequently the ones who face the most liability. Even if they did not cause the contamination, purchasers may be held liable. If owners default on loans rather than undertake costly cleanup efforts, lenders may end up owing worthless assets. Real estate professionals may be held liable for improper disclosure. You see that? Improper disclosure. So you have to make a note of that. You have to become, if anything that you do, okay, not only the environmental issues, wherever you go, you need to be the go-to agent for that area. You need to know that area back and forth, all the environmental problems, problems with the houses. You should know the board. You should know the local municipalities. You should be talking to, building, where the building permits are, the codes. You should know all this. It's good to know, because if you're working in that area, you don't want to give something as improper disclosure, right? Something that you don't know. So if you're not a seasoned realtor, get that information. It's much easier if you specialize in an area. Okay, this is going beyond the 75 hours. I'm giving you real world information. If you are specialized in an area, so much easier to know about the area to be able to help your client. If you want to work all Jersey, it's very difficult, because South Jersey is very different than North Jersey. Even going out west to Sussex County, let me tell you, like once you cross that Morris County, and keep going, it changes. It almost seems like you're already in Pennsylvania, okay? So New Jersey is very diverse. So it's good to be able to specialize in an area so you don't give improper disclosure. Individuals involved in other aspects of real estate transactions gain additional exposure. Real estate appraiser, for example, must identify and address environmental issues. Market value adjustments typically reflect the cleanup costs plus a factor reflecting the current market's value of panic and suspicion. Although the sales price may be dramatically affected, the underlying market value may remain relatively equal to others in the neighborhood. The lender who relies on the appraiser to identify values affected by environmental hazards is the appraiser's primary responsibility, although the lender may be protected under certain conditions under the Superfund Act Amendment of 1986. The lender must be aware of any potential problems and may require additional environmental reports. Okay, insurance companies may also be impacted. Mortgage insurance companies safeguard lenders' mortgage investments and may be required to bear some of the ultimate liability in the event of a loss. More importantly, in such coverage was included in the initial policy, a hazard insurance carrier may be directly liable for damages. Okay, what page are we on? 276? Hey, oh my gosh, we're almost done. All right, environmental site. Or are we? Hold on. Hold on. I'm seeing double. Hold on. And what? I passed that. Oh no, we still have 2 more pages. Okay. I guess Fernando was right. Environmental site assessment. An environmental site assessment is undertaken on a property to demonstrate the reasonable care was taken to determine whether environmental impairments exist. The evaluation can serve as a defense against liability to determine whether environmental impairments exist. The evaluation can serve as a defense against liability and prevent parties from becoming involved with pollutant land. It is frequently required by financial institutions, developer, or prospective purchaser. Commonly, the examination is conducted in phase such as phase 1 and phase 2. Oh, those are the key points. All right, I guess. But this is important, especially if you're working in a commercial property, if you're doing commercial. Phase 1 is to see what's wrong. Phase 2 is to try to resolve the problem. So here we go. First, Phase 1 ECA is requested to identify any potential environmental issues existed or near the subject property that could result in harm. Phase 2 ECA covers soil, waters, and other type of testing. They also have, I don't know if it's here, maybe I'll come across it. If you ever heard of a percolated test where they test the soil to see if water, if the density of the soil is mostly watered. So you can't build on a soil, right? There's land everywhere. If you go out of Jersey, there's land everywhere. But if the soil is wet, you can't build on it, or you have to bring more soil to dry that soil. And that test is called the percolate test, just in case if you see it on the state exam, okay? First, phase 1 ECA is requested to identify any potential environmental issues existing or near the subject property that could result in harm. Phase 2 recover, okay, I read that. Environmental impact statements. A federally sponsored project is required to conduct environmental impact statement. The statement describes the environmental impact of the project. It may include data or air quality, noise, public health and safety, energy consumption, population density, animals and vegetation, and the demand for sewage and water services. These statements are increasingly necessary for private projects as well. Public of environmental dangers. Most state regulations address the disclosure of known facts regarding 1 to 4 family residential property. In some places, real estate agents may be held accountable if they should have known about a defect. This is very true, even if the seller fails to disclose it. Very few states mandate commercial and industrial property owners to disclose environmental hazards. Okay, in the absence of statutory disclosure, real estate agents specializing in these properties should emphasize the significance of professional environmental audits to protect buyers. All right, so we're here. It's 8:51. Does anybody have any questions? I kind of put it out there where you might see. I'm going to highlight it. Question on the state exam for you guys. All of this is good information. Some of you won't use as much of this information, but it's good for you to know, to understand, depending on the region. I don't know where you guys are located in New Jersey. Some of you, yes, some of you, no. But it depends on where you are in New Jersey that you have, you know, environmental issues, things that you will have to deal with your buyers, especially if you're working in commercial. Maybe you can go to the Superfund website. Let's see right here. Where is it? Let me close this. All right. So we go to the Superfund. So here it is. So like I said before, there's so much information. It says learn about the Superfund, the news, the cleanup process, history, success story, circular overview, community involvement, Superfund redevelopment. Just for curiosity, it's always good to know about these things. The complement and benefits and cleaning up of sites. They also talk about the brownfields here. It's right here. Brownfield, Superfund task force, Superfund risk assessment, enforcement, emergency response, federal facilities, brownfields, cleanup technologies, vapor intrusion, greener cleanups, contact laboratory program, environmental response team, and financial responsibility for you guys who are interested. Okay. All right. So does anybody have any questions? Luis, is that 2 questions? You got 2 questions, Luis? Where are you? You left my morning class. I'm not going to forgive you for that. All right. He's cool. Alexander said thank you. All right. No, I'm sorry. No, I know. I understand. I'm happy you're still continuing. And you should give credit to yourself that you are showing up, you know, all this time to become, you know, a realtor, hopefully, and that this career is very rewarding for you guys. Okay. So like I said, there's things that I said that are important. I hope you highlighted them. Okay,